What's up, guys? We're replacing the right side tie rod end today. I've personally been experiencing a lot of drag to the right side whenever I brake. Some other things that you can experience is a cocked steering wheel, or of course, like I said, drag whenever you hit the brakes.
Does many things.
So your right tie rod end is going to control your steering. Left side is going to control the pitch, either in or out of your both wheels conjoined to each other. And this is your steering dampener. So to say you hit a pot in the road, it doesn't make your wheel jolt to the side. Alright, so to start off, we're going to have to remove these castle nuts right here and right here. And after that, we're going to move to the steering dampener. It's just these 4 bolts right here, and then these 2 U-bolts come off. And then we're going to move from there to the alignment sleeve, which we'll just remove that, and we unscrew this from the sleeve. So to remove the right side outer tie rod end, we're going to start off by removing these castle nuts. They have a cotter pin that goes through them, just so they don't unscrew by themselves. Then we're going to move over to the steering dampener, and when you remove this, it's just these 4 bolts, 2 U-nuts, and then the whole thing kind of falls out. Then we're going to move here to this bolt, to the tie rod end sleeve, and then when we take this bolt out, we're just going to unscrew this, the whole tie rod end, and then we're going to install the new one and do the exact same process but in reverse. So now that we have everything loosened, and we have the bolts removed, the nuts removed, we're going to use something called a stepped pickle fork. And this is the full kit for it. And the difference between all these is the gap in the middle and how much of a wedge there is. And so right here, you can see it being applied. This is the full kit, or the full tool. So how you remove this, or how you use this tool, is you pretty much wedge it in between the boot and the actual arm itself. And luckily we have an air gun that all it does is hammer in, and you can actually just use a mallet or a hammer of sorts, and you wedge it up in between there, and you remove it that way. Just easy like that. Okay, so as you can tell, this is the old tie rod end. As you can see, it's very loose, and that's something that you very much do not want. This is the brand new one, nice and upgraded, and it's very stiff. So right here is the back side of the new tie rod end. As you can tell, it has a hole in the back compared to the old one, which did not. This is what you call a Zerk fitting. It screws into the back, and it turns into a grease fitting. It allows you to re-grease, and it helps the joint last longer. How you install it is you just simply screw it in. You don't need any Teflon tape, you don't need any sealant. I'm sure you can add that for extra safety measures, but you really do not need it. Alrighty, so before we remove this tie rod end, you can do one of 2 things. You can either take a silver Sharpie and mark how many threads that you have taken out or removed, because you are going to be unthreading the tie rod end, or you can just count the threads. And so by doing that, you'll know how many threads to put back in. You would still need alignment afterwards, but it's good enough to get you back to a alignment shop. So before we start unscrewing this, you just want to make sure that you are actually unscrewing it the correct way. Some things that you can actually find is the tie rod end being screwed in reversed, as in the threads are reversed, not the tie rod end, of course. But so you just want to make sure, sometimes it might be righty-loosey, sometimes it might be, righty-tighty. Well, now that we have the tie rod removed, we're going to hold them up close to each other and try to count the threads to get it as closely aligned as possible. Ours took about 32 threads to unscrew, or unfasten, and so we're going to count 32 threads up here, and then we're going to hold them together and try to get approximately the same thread count. And kind of be warned, if you have an older vehicle or rust under your vehicle, it will be a workout just pulling that off and the amount of threads that you actually have to go through. So just be warned and get the proper tools to properly pull it off. Alrighty, so we have the new one in now. All we had to do was turn it in 29 times instead of 32, and that was just because this one was a little bit shorter than the stock one. And so now we're pretty much going to do the same thing that we did to take the old one out and put it back in. So to put it back together, you're going to start off with these two bolts, move down and tighten the dampener, and then bolt down the sleeve. You want to make sure to wipe down and clean the joints before you put them all back together. It just makes the installation easier, and it helps the nuts from being clogged up when you go to apply the nuts. To properly tighten these down, you're going to need a torque wrench. You want to torque this bolt down to about 65 foot-pounds of torque, and then you're going to want to tighten the other one down to about 75 foot-pounds of torque. After those are all tightened down, you can go ahead and install your cotter pin, and that just pretty much makes sure the bolt doesn't unloosen itself if you don't torque it down properly. So we just reinstalled the dampener and tightened this back down. With the dampener, you pretty much just want it as level as possible, as level as you can get it, and to tighten this down fairly snug. And so what we're doing now is re-greasing the joint, and you pretty much want to grease it until you start seeing grease pour out of the sides. So we're finished installing it. And before, when we used to shake the wheel, this would have a lot of play in it. And now when we shake the wheel, there's absolutely no play in it. So one thing I forgot to add is to always turn your wheel all the way left and all the way right, just to double check that everything is back into place before you go test drive your car. You're of course going to want an alignment after you do this job. Alignment usually runs about 70 to 80 bucks. So just be prepared for that when you are changing out any kind of tie rod or anything in your steering system. Thank you guys. Remember to like and subscribe, and everyone have a nice day.